Jay. My real name is Jaquan. I go by Jay. I am the creator of 2923 Comics, which has the comic book, The Scarlet Knight, Defender of the Block. And I'm also the founder or co-founder of the VenBoo app.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And tell us, let's get into you first. Let's talk about where you grew up, early life, early interests, and then we'll jump into, talking a little bit more about comics. So where did you grow up? What was life like during your childhood? Are you Kansas City native? Are you a St. Louis native? Where are you from, brother? Go ahead and talk to us about your upbringing.
Yes. So I'm a Kansas City native, born and raised. I grew up in Midtown. Well, I guess what you would consider probably Midtown, off of 58th and Prospect, right there off of 71. I grew up in a community called Town Fort Creek, mostly raised by my grandparents and my single mother. I have two younger siblings. My brother currently is incarcerated right now. He's serving a 9-year prison sentence in the federal penitentiary. My little sister is still just working hard and being her little self. But I am definitely Kansas City. I love Kansas City from the bottom of my heart. How I got started in what I would like to call the whole fantasy element of the block, right? Of the streets, was I was always just the weird person in my crew. Like, I was just one of those guys who was always into TV. When you're raised by older people, you typically watch TV a lot. So I did a lot of watching TV and got into animation, got into comic books, got into horror. Yeah, I'm still a horror fan to this day. And I mean, Kansas City is one of those places where I definitely have developed a lot of sixth senses from the community that I grew up in. But I am definitely appreciative of my background, being raised by primarily my grandparents and a single mother of two other siblings, and being the oldest child. So I have that mindset of always trying to help people. So everything that I create or everything that I do to this day thus far has been set out to encourage, but more importantly, to help.
Love it. I love it. And you spoke about some important adults in your life growing up. So that was going to be my next question. Who were some of your earliest adult influences? Or maybe just give me one. I'm sure you have many, but who are one of your earliest adult influences, and why would you say that they influenced your life and who you are, today?
My grandmother and my grandfather were heavy influences in my life. If you ever get a chance, if anybody's listening to this podcast, you ever get a chance to go to Town Fort Creek, man, I always say that place is magical, right? Right there, smack dab in the middle of the city in the hood. And I saw firsthand what it meant to take care of people. My grandmother, we stayed right next to a park. And what would happen is that people will walk down our street, walk across the park, and then hop the creek and go to their other community on the other side of the creek. And it was never a time that I walked in my house and didn't see someone I didn't know. Like, I would see people there all the time that I didn't know. Like, who was this guy on the porch talking to my grandmother, drinking some water, ice cold water, lemonade with a meal. That's just the type of person that she was. No one that could ever say that she didn't take care of them. I mean, she didn't care who you are. If you wanted to sit on that porch and talk to her, she just loved people. And my grandfather, who was also a heavy influence on me, he just also took care of people, but very strong, take care of the household, take care of all the kids. Like, he was just one of those people, like what I would like to say, a man's man, a protector, someone that you always could depend on. Even when I became an adult, I felt like I didn't really become a man until my grandfather passed away, because I didn't have that crutch anymore. I didn't have that person that I can call and say, hey, I need help, or I'm confused, or I need this, or, can you direct me in this way? Like, now I had to stand on my own 2 feet, and always knew the right thing to say. You always knew if you were with him, you were protected no matter who you were. And when I tell you, I stayed with my grandparents the majority of my life, we had so many people living with us over the years. People that weren't even family, because that's just the type of people that they were. If you needed somewhere to lay your head, you'll probably be living with us for about 5 or 6 months until you get back on your feet. I mean, that's just the type of people I was raised around on a daily basis. I didn't appreciate it then as a young man, but as I've gotten older and I see what they were doing, I understand it more. And that's how my life is really just taking the turn. And that's how I've become a better entrepreneur. That's how I've become a better person in general, is now carrying on that legacy and making sure I take care of people as well.
I love that. I love that so much. First off, shout out to your grandparents, for being all about community reciprocity and bringing up those around them. And around community, I assume that influence and being around that has influenced you today to really care about your community even more, about Kansas City, especially about, the community we'll get into right now about, why you're building that app. So, I really love that. I really love those influences, and I'm glad you shared that, because that's always beautiful to hear stories of, important people in our life actually teaching us some important lessons. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about comics today, but before my next question, aside from comics, what exactly were some of your early hobbies or interests when you were a young man? So, I know you said you got into that early, but on the side of that, was there anything else that you were super into or considering going down a different path at any other point in life?
Yes. So I like to write, even though that's kind of geared towards what I do on a daily basis now, but I love to write, but no one encouraged it. No one, and that's no knock to my grandparents or my mom. I just think arts wasn't just pushed in my community, right? You play ball, or you got into entertainment. That was just kind of like what it was. So I was heavy into writing. Man, television and movies, man, was my thing. Like I even was just talking to someone the other day about making the movie. Remember when I think MTV used to have Making the Movie? And
yes.
Exactly. So I was like, I used to love those shows. Like, and I'm surprised that I'm not somewhere really, really pursuing a career in Hollywood. At one point in time, I did, but as far as like really sticking to it and still going strong with it, I'm surprised I'm not. But something else, I play football. Football was one of those things where I played it my whole life. I was not in love with the sport of football like my friend Herron, who I went to school with since we were in preschool. But he was like one of those, super athletes, was in love with football, couldn't tell him nothing about it. And I think naturally, I just gravitated towards it because of him. And that's just really what it was. And I was pretty decent at it. And that was another thing that I did on a regular basis, but I was just really into writing. I remember now as I got older, I remember writing different like stories and for school and writing it on my own and trying to do different art and stuff like that. I was like, man, this is what I was being meant to do for like the majority of my life. Like I never noticed it then, but I never had anyone else that be like, hey man, encourage me to do so. So yeah, I definitely was heavy into writing as a young kid.
I love what you said there at the end, because, it's so important. It's one of the reasons why I started this podcast is like, in especially in minority communities, it's not often pushed to get into anything outside, at least by our friends and peers, maybe a little bit by our parents, but we don't listen too much to our parents when we're growing up. But, it's seeing, if you want to make a living doing something, you got to either go play ball or you got to be a rapper or R&B singer.
Yeah.
And then our parents might tell us to just go work a standard 9 to 5, and it doesn't matter if you like your job, just do it,
Yes.
And of course there's lessons in that. There's some growth that comes from that, but for our whole life, obviously that's not the route. So when it comes to arts or when it comes to other forms of entrepreneurship, I think it's really important for people like yourself and for, other people in our communities to create platforms or to create businesses or to create apps that really push and influence the young people coming up, to let them know that this is also an option. This is also a path. This is also something that you can do, and feeding into their creativity, feeding into what their desires are. So that's important that you mentioned that. So,
something that I remember very vaguely when I went to Southeast. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's right there. Probably at one point in time would be considered one of the worst high schools to be at. And I remember the Army were the only people at my school to recruit. Like no one, no schools. It was no different. I don't remember any career days. It wasn't until I went to LA for a second that I actually met people that were in so many diverse careers. I was like, you can get paid to do that? You can get paid to create costumes. You can get paid to be a chef, millions of dollars to be a chef. Like I just never have been exposed to these type of things and to these type of people in my life. And I consider myself to be a late bloomer when it came to being exposed to a lot of different cultures, different backgrounds. I was a late bloomer, but that's no knock to anyone else. It's just, where I was from. I was only used to used to Kansas City, and that was all I knew. So, and most of the people that I've ever been around growing up were blue collar workers. I knew a lot of entrepreneurs, but they never were in tech, or they never weren't in the arts. They were mostly like, they owned a mom and pop record store or a liquor store or convenience store of some sort. So that your natural thought is like, hey, if I want to be an entrepreneur, I have to either go into one of those two things, either be on the streets or give me like a mom and pop store of some sort. But it's so many opportunities. It's so many opportunities, man, to make a living and to enjoy what you do.
Man, exposure is everything. So anybody that's listening to this podcast right now, whether you're the person that's being exposed to these different opportunities and that's why you're listening to these episodes, or if you're just, someone who's already in these lanes, or maybe you're just an adult that's a leader in your community, which is amazing as well, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, make sure you're out there, exposing these kids to different opportunities in life. Don't just tell them about one thing just because you're biased towards that. Make sure you're providing opportunities for them to learn about as much as they can learn about. My avenue is this podcast. Your avenue, for the listeners out there might be, you might work at the Boys and Girls Club. Maybe you need to talk to the folks there. You might be part of the Big Brothers program. Maybe you need to talk to them and expose them to different things. So just any chance you get, man, practice exposure to different things outside of what people, that box that people are locked into. So
Exactly.
When did you first realize you were interested in comic books? I know you talk about, growing up watching TV. So was it then when you were a kid, just like you were just watching TV and you were seeing different shows and you started, getting into it there? Was there a friend? Was there anybody who like put you on per se?
Yes. So my grandfather, we go back to the football story. My grandfather, what he would do to encourage me to go to practice, would offer me comic books, would offer me different things. And I remember us going into Clint's Comics. My comic book is actually in Clint's Comics, which is kind of funny how those things come back around. But we went to Clint's Comics, and I told him about this store that I discovered. I didn't even know these stores exist. These comic book stores. And I was like, it's a store, and they got all these cool books with all these pictures before I even knew they were comic books. And he was like, well, if you go to football practice and you do your best, I'll buy you a comic book. And the first comic book that I had was Spider-Man. At the time, I was playing football with the Kansas City Keys Wolverines, with my friend Herron. And when I think we were like midway season, he gave me a comic book, gave me that Spider-Man comic book, man. And from that day, I just kind of enjoyed it. And, to know that you could write these, right? Like as kids, and you're transitioning to like going up to like middle school and stuff like that, the picture books that you see are not what a graphic novel is or a comic book is. It's two totally different worlds. And you're seeing this now, and it has action, and it has all these different characters that you can relate to or can't relate to. Majority of them have powers of some sort, but they mimic what you see on a regular basis, which is just humans, right? This regular human nature, and it has that element of fantasy that can take you away from your surroundings. So my grandfather was actually the person who I would say triggered the love for comic books. I knew I always wanted comic books when I started going to Clint's, but after he bought it, that's when it really clicked.
I love that. I love that because it reminds me of like, how, you know, parents or older siblings trying to incentivize younger siblings or their kids to do certain things by doing something else. So it's like, that was your grandfather's way, which is awesome. I'm glad you ended up in that. I know, like, remembering my sister, my oldest sister, you know, she was so into school. Like, that was her thing. Like, she loved school. You know, she excelled at school. She's pretty much the only one in the family at 8, 9 kids that excelled really well at school. And she ended up being a doctor, and that was her route. You know, that works for her. But I remember when I was growing up, she'd be like, Collis, like, you need to get good grades in school. I'll take you on a trip, on a cruise to this place if you get all A's this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be motivated halfway through the year, but then I was just like, I don't care about that cruise.
I don't care about it anymore. Man, yeah.
Exactly. So, like, it kind of points out, like, you gotta, you know, I'm not no parent, but for those people out there, make sure you're incentivizing them with the right things. Maybe something that's going to push them in the direction that they're actually passionate about, that you're feeding into something that's actually worthwhile. You know, for some kids, that's money. You know, if you do good in your school this year, I'll give you $100. And, you know, they take that $100 and they flip it on a lemonade stand and they turn 40 and they end up being an entrepreneur because it started there. But wherever it is, make sure you're incentivizing in a way that really speaks to somebody. So that's a really dope story to hear.
Definitely, you know, from a person who has a child who sometimes I incentivize all the time. You know, I say, hey, man, because he boxes, he plays lacrosse, plays ice hockey. And I mean, one thing I never had to worry about with his schooling, he's just like a perfect student. But with his sports, I always say, hey, man, if you work hard, you do good in this game, you know, you passing, you do. And I always teach him, and this goes back to me trying to teach him things that I learned from the streets that I can pass on to him without him being in that element. And I say, well, if you take care of the team, right? If I say you passing, you get assists, you playing defense, don't try to score. I just want you to strictly play defense. I want you to strictly be in the back. Don't worry about it. And that's when you'll get what you want. You know, if it's some Jordans or if it's a game, headphones, whatever it is, I always tell them, like, hey, you got to take care of our own, right? You can't always be the star. Everybody can't be in the front. And I think that's kind of what's wrong with our society, is that we all want to be in the forefront, in the front, rather than just play our part, right? Like, everybody can't run the train. Like, somebody has to be in the back of it. Like, someone has to serve cookies, whatever it is. You know, you just got to know what your job is and to be good at that, right? So I try to do that with him a lot, is just saying, hey, man, you know, you earn your keep, but more importantly, man, whatever you're doing, you got to take care of people. And that's how I was taught in my community, was that, hey, you take care of people. You know, if somebody saw you late to school, you know, Miss Lucille or whoever it was, like, hey, boy, it's 8:30. Why you ain't at school? Or, hey, you're going to miss the bus. And these are people who are not even in your household. You know, hey, how's school going? And I try to teach them that now early. And we worry about our people, and we take care of each other.
I love that. I think there's like two underlining points you made there. You know, taking care of people, you know, your community, your family, you know, taking care of people, point blank, period. And then also, you know, like you said, everybody can't be the star. You got to play your part. And when you play your part, you get really good at that part. You know, like you said, you know, hey, just don't worry about anything else but defense. Or, you know, if it's sport, don't worry about, if this person has this skill, if they're a shooter, you know, they're a shooter, don't worry about anything else but shooting. Just shoot that ball. Don't even think about it if you miss. If you're on defense, don't worry about nothing but passing and defending, whatever that might be. You know, you might, somebody might be on the yearbook, you know, and they don't play any sports, but they're in the yearbook club. Hey, don't worry about anything but writing the best quotes for these students, you know. And when people do that, they develop these skills, and these skills they can develop sub niches inside of these skills. And now we're starting to see in like modern day time, having a skill is so valuable, not only monetarily, but just in general. Like, if you have a skill, especially a niche skill, and you know how to do something really well, whether it's in sport, whether it's writing, whether it's talking, whether it's video cameras, or whatever it might be, if you are really good at a specific skill, you're gonna make a bag. And if you take care of people, then you're gonna make a bag and also be a leader. You're also gonna be somebody that the community loves and looks towards. So, you know, money and taking care of people is an awesome mix, you know. So
Yes.
I think you made some really good points that direct people in that
And
direction.
one thing I want to say too is that I want people to understand this. You can learn new skills, but the number one thing is to make sure before you step up to the line that you perfected that skill. You can learn new skills, right? You can go learn how to ride a bike and then learn how to ride a skateboard. But I don't want you, after you learn to ride a skate, you're just now learning to ride the skateboard. I don't want you going down Devil's Backbone on the skateboard and you ain't even really learned how to really glide on it or balance yourself. You just got to know when you're ready to be in the forefront. Like when you're ready, then you can go up there and you be like, hey, I want to play offense today. But if you barely perfect the defense, how you gonna move the offense? You just gotta know, when you're ready. So I just want to throw that out there. Like you just gotta know when you're ready.
That's extremely important. Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I wanna I wanna double back to the comic books. When did you start creating your first comics? Can you tell us a little bit about your first comic book? Maybe it's storyline if you're open to sharing that, like your very first one that you can remember. Can you talk about the characters? Let us in your brain.
Yeah, so my first comic book and my only comic book, I have a graphic novel, man. It's been in production for like 2 years. I'm not even gonna lie to you. But that's something I really am passionate about. It's almost done. It's getting illustrated. But my first comic book, and the reason why I did one comic book, and I'm gonna talk about that, was Scarlet Knight, Defender of the Block. And it's about two cousins who were raised by their grandparents, who decide to go back home to be emergency room doctors, go back to their community, just like me, go back to their home to be emergency room doctors, but they stumble upon a magic gem that makes them knights in the modern day time. So the two cousins end up feuding on how to save the community because this magic gem turns people into other medieval creatures and creates like medieval chaos. So the two cousins are now feuding because they're trying to decide how can they save their community, how can they turn everything back to normal. One believes, hey, we got to take this by force. We got to control people. People are stupid. They don't know what they're doing. And the other cousin is like, no, man, we got to do what we were set out to do when we became doctors, which is take care of people and guide them and direct them. And it just kind of shows you how when it comes to inner city issues and underserved communities, how we all are not on code, like how we all have so many ideas of how to save the community that we're just on a treadmill. Like, right, we're not going anywhere. We're doing a lot of work, we're not going anywhere. And it's also loosely based on my brother and I and how we were raised in the same households, but went two totally different places in life. Like, we heard the same ethics, the same morals, but it's just like telephone. We heard the message different. And, with him serving time for doing what he did and making choices. I never say bad or good choices, right? He made choices that led to what he would consider himself to be a bad outcome. So it's loosely based on that as well. But then also, my grandparents passed away about 4 years ago. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about all those great things that he taught me growing up. And I thought about what animation and cartoons and books taught me growing up. And I was like, I've never seen anyone that looks like my grandfather in a book. Never saw it. I never saw a guy in a book or character in the book being raised by his grandparents. I've never seen it. And now I've seen Peter Parker be raised by his Aunt May, I've seen Batman be raised by Alfred, but I've never seen those surrogate parents of a grandmother and a grandfather who are now instilling those old ethics and old morals that they were raised with to modern day children. And possibly in their mind, in some cases, they did right because they had two grandsons who became doctors. But they don't know that one grandson is thinking outside of what the other grandson is thinking. And sometimes what we see in underserved communities is that the parents typically blame themselves for the choices that their children make. And I wanted to place all of that in a comic book. So I placed my grandparents' likeness in the comic book. And I started writing it. My first letter I wrote was in January 2018. I kept putting it off. And then I went on vacation from work. And I was laying in the bed, just being lazy on vacation. My birthday is 2 days after Christmas. And I was just being lazy, chilling 2 days after Christmas. My son got all my money, where I'm gonna go. And I was like, it just clicked. I said, I'm gonna start writing. I started writing, and I finished it, had it. I was funding it on my own money. And comic books are expensive. Comic books is one of the most self-funded industries in the world, right? Probably number one. So I was funding it on my own, and I had a frat brother named Herron with Porterhouse KC. I don't know if everybody's familiar with them. And he's into comic books. And he was like, Quan, you're gonna have to do crowdfunding, man. Like, you're gonna go broke doing it this way. I put it off. Didn't want nobody to really know. It goes back to that young man in the city mentality. I didn't want nobody to know that I was writing comic books. Like, who would believe in me, that Quan is doing this, and man, I just manned up, put the comic book on Indiegogo. My first Kickstarter failed, but I put it on Indiegogo, and that funded 110%. And man, Scarlet Knight has been a blessing because it's opened up doors to people, to community. It's opened up doors to my other avenue that I'm going through right now. And I think the reason why I did one comic book, I just always had the mentality, like, if I focus on one thing, it would be successful. I just didn't have the mindset. I was like, hey, if I have 4 or 5 comic books, that they would be successful. I think one would be more successful than the other. Then having to coordinate that and do all that, I didn't want to do that. I said I wanted to have a streamlined focus on the Scarlet Knight to do what it's supposed to do, which was help kids that look just like me, but then also tell cool stories about the streets. I mean, from 2 kids that came from the inner city who made it out, went back to give back. And I've never seen anybody that looks like me in fantasy. Like, I got Lovecraft Country, and I was excited. And when I tell you, I was like, man, thank you. Because I've never seen myself in a fantasy. I used to always worry about that with horror too. I used to be like, man, look, do zombies just not come to the inner city? Like, is that what it is? Like, do they just stop at the border when it starts to turn city? Or does ghosts and ghouls and goblins stop in the suburbs and the rural areas? Like I always think, like, man, what happens in the inner city when it's a zombie plague? Like, what happens in the inner city when ghosts are taking over your grandparents' homes? Like, what happens? So that's where all that inspiration balled up into me and creating the Scarlet Knight. And of course, every element of myself, my grandparents in it. My high school mascot was the Scarlet Knight. I put that in it, of course. It's based loosely on just everything about my life and this community. So I think that's why it's been successful thus far.
I love that. I love that. And for those who, after hearing that, man, beautiful story and hearing the inspiration behind it, where can people get that at? Where can people purchase? Where can people support that? I was going to ask that at the end anyways, but for those who may not listen to the full episode right now, where can they get that at?
Yeah, you can go to 2923comics.com. You can also go to Clint's Comics. I actually need to go by a few stores and make sure they still stocked up. I'm also in Pulp Fiction Comics. Pulp Fiction Comics, Bebop Comics, and I'm missing one. I cannot remember off the top of my head right now. I'm also in St. Louis. It's on my social media. I'm sorry if I'm just drawing a blank right now, but I am in 2 stores in St. Louis as well, and one in Vegas. I think it's Heroes for sale in Vegas. So definitely, but 293 Comics is probably the best bet. You can get it from me if you're not running around and don't feel like shopping. We will mail it to you and get it to you. We even have a local pickup option.
I love it. I love that. And ladies and gentlemen, all that will be listed in the description at the end of this episode. So if you don't have time to listen to the full episode right now, just go to the description and go ahead and click that link. So if you could meet any comic book writer in the world, dead or alive, who would it be? And
any comic book creator?
And drop a why for the reason why.
Dang, man. Can we come back to that one? Because it's so many going through my head.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. We can.
Yeah, let's come back to that.
Let's come back to it for sure. I do want to talk about, a little bit more about the business of comic books. So can you maybe share, because you were sharing a little bit right there that it's a really expensive to like put out a comic book. So
you got me thinking now too, man. Why you do that to me? Now I'm thinking, Oh man, I'm sorry, man. I really want to. Oh my God. Let me go back to it.
Okay.
Because I had to look at my Rolodex and like go through all my favorite comics. I keep them in my pictures and my screenshots. Different people. I just like what I do is I like to visualize and kind of like a vision board of who I would like to meet. And I just started going through my pictures and screenshots of artists and creators, and it probably would be Frank Miller. I will probably be Frank Miller, and the reason why, man, you know what? Yeah, Frank Miller probably be the best bet. I think I was heavily influenced by Sin City. I did enjoy Sin City, and I just think to have that gym, I would have loved to meet him. And I can't remember off the top of my head if he's passed on or not. So I would definitely say Frank Miller.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm sure there's some other listeners out there that will match that same writer with you. So if anybody out there is a huge fan of Frank Miller as well, or had the same answer to that, write my guy. Maybe y'all can chop it up about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so talk a little bit about the process. So say there's a young kid out there right now, and he's like written up a comic book, right? He has like 40, 50 pages, pictures and scripts and storylines written up, but he just doesn't know the next step. And obviously we have Google, obviously we have YouTube, but for that person that's listening out there, can you share maybe where they can start the process of getting that published and getting that in store?
So after you get it all written and created and you get your pages all inked and colored and lettered, the next step would be print, right? Or if you want to do online, that's fine, right? But people still love to hold that physical copy. You will go to print, find your great printer. I've been with Impress Printing off 17th of Baltimore since I started Scarlet Knight. I wouldn't let anyone else do that as of right now. I've been with them since day one. They've done my coloring book as well. I would definitely get a good printer because that's going to be your business right there, right? If it costs you $3 or $4 to print a comic, it's going to be hard for you to sell it for 7 or 8. It's hard, so get you a good printer to get you a good price. And then from there, what I've done, and I can just tell you what I did, I knocked on doors. I went into comic book stores, told them what I were doing, gave them a physical copy, said, hey, this is what it's about. And they look at it, they look it over, glance it over. If they like it, they pull you in. They say, yeah, we'll get this, we'll pay you right now. We'll do like 50% cut, 60-40 cut, however, you decide that's where your negotiating skills come into play. And then from there, your book is in the store. It's on the shelf. Like it happens right there in front of your face that quick. You literally get a check in some cases. You get a check in some cases, and they put your stuff on the shelf. Also, another way is that they'll just put you on commission where whatever you sell, they'll get your cut. But you definitely got to stay on top of that, which kind of led me into my other business endeavor. We'll talk about that, but you got to stay on top of that. Hey, knocking on the door, going back. Hey, have we sold any copies? Where are we at? Doing that. I'm just more so in the beginning. I was not on top of my business with the comic because I was coming at it from a creative perspective. But when I started to take more control of the business and really understood the checks and balances, things started to develop for the business and it started to grow. So from there, man, once you get the book created, everything else is easy. You knock on some doors, make some phone calls, get it up in some of these stores, and if you got a great product out here, they'll pick it up, they'll take it.
I love that. I love that. This is just a side question, and maybe you already did it, and maybe you don't even want to do it, but just a question. Have you thought about turning your comic book into like an audiobook version?
Not so much an audiobook. We are working on animation right now. But yeah, not so much of the audiobook. I have thought about that. I even thought about doing it when it comes to Braille, getting it created for the blind and or the visually impaired. Also, I have thought about that for when it comes to getting an audiobook. I have thought about that. It's just so many steps with it, right? And then making sure that you pay the right people. to do it. So I definitely have thought about it. Definitely have thought about it.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to transition, man. You saw a problem in the comic book industry and you created an app to solve it. What was that problem? Or you co-founded an app to solve it.
Yeah.
What was that problem, man?
So what I found out when I became a comic book creator is that it was difficult to find conventions. It was difficult to find different opportunities to sell a product. And when it comes to the whole networking field, I was not a expert on it, nor was I the best. So I was missing out on opportunities to find some of these events, but also you working 10, 12-hour days sometimes, then to come home and try to search for events or different groups or whatever the case may be, you just like, man, I ain't got time. So what I did was I created an app called VenBoo that connects vendors with vending opportunities. But then also what I started to notice is that when I started doing my market discovery and doing my interviews is that a lot of individuals that go to these events do not track their expenses. So what VenBoo also does is allow you to track your expenses so you can strategically sell at these events. You're also able to upload your receipts in those events as well. And that's more so that you can start taking control of your business so that when tax season comes around, you can write those things off. I learned these things by going through 2923 Comics. And what I wanted to do is provide everything in a centralized location so that if someone works 10 hours as a nurse or, maybe they just got kids all over the place, whatever it is, they can literally get a notification that a comic book convention or a pop-up shop or conference or trade show, whatever it is, has just opened for registration, and they can book that booth from the palm of their hand. They can pay, they can do whatever they want through the palm of their hand, but more importantly, they can start tracking their expenses as soon as they book. So after they book their booth, they can enter in their debits right there. Hey, booth cost me $40. So now I know before I go into this event, I need to make $40.01 in order to make a profit. And this is all about empowering entrepreneurs, but also helping them find opportunities.
I love that. I love that. I love that so much, man. I came across your story in an article. I don't remember particularly who wrote it. I'll probably pull it back up. Startland News. So I came across your story, and I found it really inspiring. And the reason I really found it interesting is just because when we think about businesses, when we think about startups, there's definitely millions of them out there, but there's certain ones that are popularized, right? And talked about the most. And I was really excited to see somebody talking about the comic book industry because it's so niche, but has such a huge fan base, and to see, a brother, in the community, in that space, trying to solve an issue was really inspiring. And I think it'll be super inspiring for people to hear your story and to see somebody who looks like them doing something that they thought nobody else liked, because I don't know if you felt like that when you were younger, but I know when I've talked to some of my other friends that have been super into comic books or anime or other super niche topics that aren't seen as quote unquote cool, you know what I'm saying? It was difficult for them, growing up, because they could be in one space with their homies talking about what their homies want to talk about, but they're not really interested in what their homies are talking about. And when they try to bring up comic books or when they try to bring up anime, they get brushed off and nobody wants to talk about that. And when that's something you're passionate about, something that you want to live out your life doing, that kind of hurts, especially as a young bull. So I think that's a dope. That's why I really, I'm excited to have you on the show and excited for people to listen to this.
Yeah, one thing about my friends, which is, majority of us were jocks. That's just being honest. One thing about my friends is that they accepted me for who I was. One thing about my friend Herron, I talk about him. He talked about, man, I always knew you were going to be in the movies one day, bro. Like, I always could see it. Like, a lot of people around me saw it way before me. I always tell this story about Miss Tooley, who was my AP English teacher. And she said, Jaquan, I think you definitely should start writing. I think you have a passion for it. And the stories that you love to read, because I was heavy into Macbeth and Hamlet. Because I just thought, I'm like, man, people are dealing with these problems right now. Like, as we speak, like, this was 2000. like to Shakespeare, who didn't look anything like me, didn't come from anywhere near where I've came from. And I was just like, well, how is he knowing these stories? These are stories that I hear all the time in my community. So, you know, I think the hardest thing was seeing that no one in my community looked like me in the industry that I'm in. No one. Heck, I didn't even know outside of watching cartoons, I didn't even know people read comic books in my neighborhood. So I think that's why it's so important. Kids are a lot cooler than what we were. I think we were still stuck in that wanting to be cool stage, right? Like wanting to be Mr. Popular. I blame it on 80s movies. I think it's like everybody wants to be at the cool kids table, and everybody wants to be Mr. Popular. Now these kids, they're all popular in their own their own areas, you know, right? Some kid might be able to be the goth kid, he might be the coolest kid in school. Right. So I think these kids are a lot more accepting, and I think it's going in a good direction. I'm hoping.
I agree. What have been 3 challenging parts about building out an app, you know, that you didn't expect to be super challenging, but have kind of popped up along the road as a huge obstruction? And, you know, the reason I asked this question, you know, you don't have to give all 3, but at least a few challenging parts, is because there's going to be a lot of other young men who are going to try to go down this same route. And maybe, you know, you sharing a little bit of the challenges can help them, you know, bypass that issue.
The biggest thing starting out was checking my ego at the door, right? I consider myself to be an expert in a lot of things, but tech was not one of those. You know, I knew I'm a tech head. Like I knew I was heavy in technology, but building an app and developing an app, this is way different. So asking a lot of questions to the point where, you know, at first you're like, man, dang, I probably sound dumb, right? But they're expert at what they do. That's why they're doing it. So your key to being a business owner, for number one, being an entrepreneur, is to make sure that you understand everything that your name is attached to. So I would ask a ton of freaking questions. I also would read a lot on developing apps. Some of the jargon, if I didn't quite understand it, I would go back, look it up, see what that means. Man, you know, a phone is more than a way of us communicating. And it is an information highway. I will always, even in developer meetings, just be Googling. Like, okay, all right, I know where we're at now. So I had to check my ego at the door. Number one, I just had to educate myself on what was being done. Right. When we have our weekly meetings, and I would go back and see, how does this work? You know, where was Uber at around this time? You know, how were they doing? How were they preparing to launch? So I was doing a lot of studying, doing a lot of checking myself, but then more importantly, just preparing myself, right? Just preparing myself to go in a different industry and expecting what was going to come with that. I dealt with it in the comic book industry. I didn't look like anyone. Now, I might have to say skin color, but I might not have practiced the same cultures as some of the other brothers that I saw in the industry, or might not have a similar background. So it was a lot of times that I felt like by myself. So it was like, hey, get ready for what's about to come, preparing myself, educate yourself. And then, I was ready to rock and roll. So developing the app, you got people who are experts who are doing it for you. You're not in there behind a computer doing it. You just need to know how everything works. And you need to know how you're going to provide this product to the community that you're serving. So other than that, I was ready to go.
I love it. So let's say it's what year is it? 2021? Sometimes I forget. All right. So 2026, man, 5 years from now, what does VenBoo look like? Where do you expect to be?
Oh my God. I'm hoping that VenBoo would have an office in every major city. I definitely would like us to have staff in every major city, at least 10 to 15 in each major city. As our community relations individuals who will go out and find these events. I want VenBoo to be more of an experience for non-enterprise entrepreneurs. And then I'm hoping that we would be at 1 million users. Like, that's what I want in 5 years. I want 1 million users, and I'm talking about worldwide. Like, I want 1 million users. So I also want VenBoo to be a culture change, right? When I think about Lyft and I think about Uber and Lyft changed our culture, right? And it was an app that no one really believed in the beginning. Like, no one believed, like, who would get in a random person's car? That goes against everything we've been taught our whole lives, is getting in the car of a stranger. Now it's a part of our culture. It's in rap songs. It's in TV. I mean, it's everywhere. And, that's what I aspire to be. Actually, I mean, I follow Lyft and Uber quite a bit, just because I think I knew they had to go through what I'm going through now, which is letting the world know about a great product, knowing that you have a great product, but just trying to explain that to the world. And I studied the people who've done it before me. And I just think that we're going to be in a great place in 5 years. I can honestly see it, and I feel it now. We're getting meetings every day, people contacting us about the app, users interested in the app. And I know we're going to have to grow here very soon, but I'm okay with us making the right steps.
I love it. I love it. And I affirm you in that, brother. I think that all of that's going to happen. I'm excited to, see that all, manifest itself in real life. I think you have a great spirit. I love the energy behind what you're doing. I love the story behind what you're doing. It's very authentic and true to you. And I think you have, all the pillars, all the necessities to building something huge. And I can't wait to see it happen. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem, brother. We're going to do a speed round, and then I'm going to ask you a bonus question, and we're going to wrap it up. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you guys listen closely to these speed rounds and answer them in your own room with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom, your dad, whoever you're sitting with, listening to this with right now. If you're a comic fan, if you're a superhero fan, I want you guys to answer these questions. All right. So it's called a speed round, but you ain't got to answer super fast if you don't want to. So,
okay.
Which of these heroes would you elect as a leader of your group? All right. Superman, Batman, Rocket Raccoon, or Wolverine?
Batman.
Batman. All right. Who is number one on your most wanted list? Magneto, Joker, or Dr. Doom?
Magneto.
Bet. Some heroes work better as loners. So would you rather be in a team if you were a hero, or would you rather work solo?
Be in a team.
Be in a team. Got you. Partnership or like a group? Like two people?
Partnership.
Bet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your team, let's say you build out a team, right? And your team needs a female member. Who would you try to hire from another group or just another superhero that's a woman? Who would you hire?
Rogue.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to double back to question number 2. Why'd you choose Magneto?
I think Magneto, just like any other character, he knew the right things to do. He was hurt, and he was hurt for good reason. I think the story of X-Men, I mean, it's what we're dealing with today, right? It's just similar to Scarlet Knight Defender of the Block, where you have a person who's been wronged by society, and the society is telling him that he's not worth it, or he shouldn't be on this earth, or he shouldn't be able to have the same liberties and freedoms as everyone else. And to be pissed off about that and wanting to create change, I will pick Magneto every time. Now, as far as the murderous side of Magneto, I'm not an advocate for murder, but I can definitely see why Magneto makes some of the choices that he makes.
I knew you were going to have a great answer to that. That's why I had to double back. All right, brother. Well, I really appreciate you for your time today. You had, first off, amazing answers. I love every guest that's come on this show, but you always, really enjoy guests who like always have good, powerful and immediate answers and are very thoughtful with how they respond. And I think you did a really good job at that. And so I just want you to know that, so you can carry that confidence with you into, your more future interviews, more future conversations with future investors, more future conversations with future users, and just know that you got that ability to speak and get your message across. So I just want to shout you out for that.
I appreciate it, bro.
No problem, brother. So the bonus question is, it's your last day on earth. All right. You're 105 years old. You've lived an amazing life. You've done everything you wanted to do. You've achieved everything you wanted to achieve, but your great grandchildren are sitting at your feet, and you get to leave them with one piece of advice on how to live life. And this is all they're going to remember you for. What are you going to say?
Screw everybody else. Do you?
Screw everybody else and do you. The Culture Talks podcast. That is the final words of today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you leave a 5-star review if you enjoyed this episode. Share it with a friend. Leave a comment. Do all the stuff that's going to help us grow, because that's the only way we can grow. I can only do so much. Before we sign out, brother, go ahead and share your social media platforms and your website so people can find you and support you.
Yes, or if you're a vendor, please head to myvenboo.com. That's myvenboo.com. If you're interested in possibly purchasing the Scarlet Knight Defender of the Block, we are at 2923comics.com. That is 2923comics.com. I'm also on social media. It's the same, my VenBoo app on Instagram. For Scarlet Knight, Scarlet_Knight 2923 for the book. So just check us out. I'm also on Scarlet Knight Jaquanda. Always open to have dialogue, always open to communicate. When I tell you, anybody that inboxes me or DMs me, I answer any question that I can. If I help lead you in the right direction, if I don't know firsthand, I'll find someone else that does. But I'm just all about seeing what we can do to all progress. And I mean, just really, I want to make someone else a millionaire. I'm not worried about myself. I want to make someone else a millionaire. And if I become a millionaire in the process, thank God. But I'm really, my whole purpose in life is to help others. And I'm doing good on that path right now.
I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're signing out. Have a great one.